Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to another session of Dialogue with Prof Mandi Rukuni. My name is Kevin Kumire, and I will be your moderator for tonight. Tonight's session is a continuation of the detraumatization, decolonization of the African Mind series. Tonight, Prof Mandi will present on Transcending to One Afrika. This will be a 40-minute presentation from Prof. After that, the floor will open for 40 minutes for contributions and questions. We will close the session and the conversation will migrate to our WhatsApp and Telegram groups where Prof Mandi will share his final thoughts for tonight. The session will be available for viewing after 24 hours on our YouTube channel, Dialogue with Prof Mandi Rukuni. Please subscribe to our channels for content. Session rules will be, please keep your microphone muted at all times. Please use the hand reaction button if you wish to ask or contribute a question. Questions and contributions can be shared with the moderator or the host via direct messaging. Not all questions will be responded to, but will be included in the media pack, which will later be shared on our social media platforms. Thank you. Welcome once again. Over to you, Prof.
Thank you very much, Kevin, and greetings to you all. So, Transcending to One Afrika is all about uniting for power. I mean, every nation understands the notion of uniting for power, but in the case of Africans, we have united around three major notions. There's Pan-Africanism, which is probably the widest used term when we look at how we unite for power as Africans. There's also the term United States of Africa, which was popularized by Marcus Garvey. It's also a term you will find used by some of the proponents and some of the serious prophets for where Africa should be and ought to be. Then there's also Afrocentricity, which is another term which also attempts to explain a higher level interpretation of the centrality of Africa in terms of the world. So the idea of One Afrika has always been around in one way or another. Before colonization, Africans would expand, compete, they would fight, we would integrate. We were integrating in our own way. But after colonization, following the Berlin Conference of 1854-55, would be the kind of modern era of how we as Africans started looking at how we should unite to regain our lost power. Today, the highest level interpretation of this is the Africa Union Agenda 2063, which is the latest configuration of uniting for power and carries the aspirations for an African continent, expresses the desire to see birth of a politically united Africa, secure and an economically integrated Africa, the common market and all that, and all within now a strong understanding of inclusive development on the continent. So even from day one of colonization, African countries have slowly and increasingly been trying to figure out how to come together. In today's terms, there's a preponderance on economic issues, and somehow the uniting for power in Africa is got the economic integration as the top priority. I'll be questioning that later on, but we see other parts of Africa, for instance, East Africa, where they're making far more progress than just economic free trade areas. You see freer movement of people beyond the commitment to just a single market. So the idea that Africans should travel right across Africa freely, that one is born an African and always an African should freely travel across, carries so much potentiality that it's being pushed in certain parts of the continent. Many African scholars and African leaders in the past and today understand that uniting is the way forward. But if you look at the most successful modern era of uniting for power, is the period of liberation from colonial rule. The extent to which the Organization of African Unity fought colonization on the continent just shows what Africa can achieve if it is truly united on an issue. But there's no single issue since the one of decolonizing Africa. There's not single issue that has united Africans as fight against colonialism politically. And you go back, it's been around. We have our heroes and our super prophets on African unity, Marcus Garvey's, Nkrumah's, and many others in the past and today. So each step towards greater cooperation and unity of the continent is an important one. We're going to have to build this brick by brick. We just have to actually understand the engineering of this so that we do understand, even if we are building it brick by brick, we are not going backwards. So the new generation of leaders do understand that power in this 21st century is reflected in the strength of numbers. So we know that, we have understood that. So it's just the way we reconfigure ourselves. So we need to ask ourselves, has Africa really learned much in our attempt to be One Africa? It's an important question to ask so that we go back into our history and current circumstances and be able to decipher even more what it takes to demolish this whole, call it disunitedness, which, by the way, was not there before colonization. I'll also talk about it because there's a difference between trying to unite Africa because we were never united, which is different to trying to unite Africa, given that historically we were one. Okay, so this is basically the direction of my talk today, trying to push this One Africa agenda. The main reason, as far as I'm concerned, why it's unstoppable is that whether we would want to believe it or not, we have gone through 50, 60 years of sufficient evidence of the failure of the post-colonial state. It's only over the last 20 years or so that Africans started accepting that the post-colonial state, it will never succeed. We have to rediscover ourselves as Africans, and we have to unite. That's why of the three important ethos or concepts of Pan-Africanism, United States of Africa, Afrocentricity, I am going to tease all of them out so that we can see, all the three have important elements. So when I say brick by brick, it's a genuine attempt to be practical about this issue. But let's first go back and ask why Africa is so central to the future of this world, to the future of humanity. It is the mother continent. It is the oldest inhabited continent, on Earth. Humans and human ancestors have lived in Africa for more than 5 million years. Okay, and the reason why Africa is the center of origin of humans. They originated in Africa because Africa is got the greatest surface area on earth, which is closest to the sun, closest to the energy of the sun and the stars. So being the center of origin is important in biological and ecological terms, because as a species evolves and as challenges arise, often the species has to go back to the center of origins to get the most diverse set of genes, which are of critical importance for survival of a species. Yeah. So in spite of being the hardy origins of humans, the continent is famously beautiful. I mean, it's uniquely beautiful. It's amazingly beautiful. Whether you're looking at its mountains, natural wonders, the coastlines, the wildlife is the most charismatic. There's no wildlife in the whole world more charismatic than the lion and the rhinoceros, the giraffe. I mean, it's just amazing. Okay, so the continent has this unique culture and heritage that is the most diverse, wide-ranging. That's why Africa is the center of origins. The other reason why the centrality of Africa is important is because the previous assumptions of the stability of Western civilization is now on shaky grounds on several counts. But we also see new forms of reactive nationalism in the so-called first world. Brexit and America first are enough evidence of the rhetoric of a civilization that's in trouble. And once again, in this world, an attempt to think that isolation is the answer to the future. I mean, if the original Africans felt that isolation was the answer to the future, they wouldn't have crossed across to populate the rest of the world. Yeah. The other reason, and probably one of the most important political reasons for uniting for power, is that most people, and especially Africans, may not fully appreciate that the reason why Africans are persecuted is because of your color and your appearance. Okay. All the other reasons are insignificant. You can be wealthy, you can be good looking, you can be most educated. You are still going to be targeted because of your color and your appearance. So it is also important to realize that the oppressor refuses to admit guilt of this crime, which has been going on for a few centuries now. But we also have to acknowledge that the oppressor is also entering a phase of trauma, realizing the fallacy of the invincibility or supremacy of that civilization. So it is important for Africans to acknowledge that Africa did not disunite. Africa was divided. So when we are rebuilding Africa for unity, I think it's a mistake to assume that what's making it difficult for us to unite is because it's always been like that. It's not. We have to understand that uniting Africa was the thing that was inevitable. So we have to rediscover again the inevitability of uniting. The Berlin Conference, which was called by the German Chancellor Bismarck, it was actually Europeans were fighting. It were going to go to war on the count of wanting to get parts of Africa. So the Berlin Conference was actually called to avoid a European war over African territory. Okay, so all the major European states were invited, including the United States. That's what led to the Berlin Conference and the disuniting of Africa. Okay, the Berlin Conference, 1884-85, never really saw major change to that racist view. Slave trade was going to be allowed under the Berlin Conference conditions, and they were just going to not just divide it amongst themselves, but they would leave a few lakes and waterways neutral so that they can navigate around. Okay, so I have skimmed around to see how our biggest thinkers, our sharpest architects, intellects have viewed overall strategies for One Afrika, for transcending all these issues and uniting Africa. And I came up with 6. These 6 strategies are not exclusive. And I'm bringing them in for discussion so that we can pick the best we can from each strategy, because we need the best we can from all. The first strategy is something that I conjured up after realizing the major difference between how Asians have approached their own form of uniting for power and the way Africans may want to consider moving forward. So that's why I'm calling it the tiger versus the lion. Because if you really look at the Asians, they are much bigger population maybe than Africa is, and more diverse, but individual nations have been molded over long periods of time, and making it a lot more natural to gather around their languages and culture. Whether you're looking at India or China, Japan, South Korea, they were never so disunited around the origins that the Asian tiger philosophy of developmental state makes a lot of sense. In Africa, what I believe we Africans and African leaders have to realize that in Africa, there's no way out but to fight the post-colonial situation collectively. That's why the lion is the most successful predator in the world, because it's the only major predator which will fight and hunt in a pride, in a group. And when I look at African states in the African Union, I see exactly the African lion strategy, because I see in a reprioritized African Union, for instance, the African Union and its institutions, African Union Commission, and NEPAD, and the regional bodies, that's the lion. It should just, it's there for protection. It's there for ensuring the territory is not fouled by investors. When you come into Africa, respect. Wherever Africans are, they have to be respected. The individual nation states are like lionesses. They are the real masters of providing prosperity. They are the ones that really know how to hunt and nurture and fight together. They will hunt together. There's no hierarchy amongst the lionesses. Okay, but we need both. We need an African Union which really should not take any nonsense from anyone in the world, whether it's an individual country or collective. One that ensures that no African country is abused, no African anywhere in the world is abused by anyone. You touch any African, you touch all of us. Okay. The second strategy is the federated approach. There are quite a few proponents of, and this is a very pragmatic thing of realizing, okay, we got the colonial boundaries. They really don't make sense, but we are on a path dependency. We are not going to be able to erase them quickly. But what we do is minimize effects. So we keep the individual nation states institutions. We all have our own parliament, presidents, reserve bank, etc., etc. But we make broader policies across, and the federations come together, and they may make their own laws, but they can, at a continental level, a constitutive act of the African Union would form the constitution around which supranational laws are made. So that's the federated approach, very practical, has possibilities. The third is a transfer of power to supranational entities. This would become possible, for instance, actually, if the constitutive act of the African Union made it possible to create an African Union Commission or an African Union Development Agency, the NEPAD, and many other African Union institutions, the Parliament, Pan-African Parliament, the African Bank, that is really owned by Africans, the Africa, not the FDB, which is not owned by Africans. If those supranational entities were given sufficient teeth to bite, resources, and legal power to take action, clearly defined and can be executed, those supranational entities would then at least ensure that once as Africans were agreed at our Pan-African Parliament, we pass laws, we pass policies and laws, they will be respected by every nation. That will be one way of really uniting Africa. So that, once again, pluses and minuses, I'm bringing all these so that we can get nuggets, whatever feels relevant or wholesome for us as we build the overall strategy. Then there's a unitary state, which is what Marcus Garvey was on about when he said United States of Africa is one executive president, one federal bank, one army, and so on and so forth. So they are major proponents of that, to say there's no need to waste time doing a federated thing, this, that, let's just do it. So there are also strengths and negatives, but the long and the short here for me is that when you listen carefully to arguments by some of these proponents, especially the Marcus Garvey's, there is very important lessons in here, in a sense of, if you cannot imagine what a united Africa looks like, then you can't even start to build one. Okay. Number 5 is the political versus economic approach issue, because right now, if you look at the African Union, the top priorities are around economic development. There's political stability, yes, peace and security. So it's a kind of one hand imitating European Union type of a union, but the truth is that it's kind of an isomorphic type of mimicry, because Africans really behave very differently to Europeans when it comes to how member states relate to each other. We're the biggest union. I mean, 55 countries. There's no regional bloc anywhere in the world, anywhere close to that kind of number. Then finally is Afrocentricity, which is an idea which was popularized by Molefi Kete Asante, an African-American, and a very interesting idea, which I'm going to come to when I finish kind of treating these overall strategic options. But Afrocentricity is a rich mixture of almost all the key elements and ethos, from highly spiritual understanding of the centricity of Africa to how to construct nations. So I'll be coming back to that shortly. So once again, when I look at those overall strategies I was talking about, I would say those visions, ethos, desired futures that are involved there always meet two categories of negative forces against African unity. There's the mind barriers, and then there's the physical barriers. If you look at the mind barriers, I would put them into three categories: fear, doubt, and guilt. And guess what? 80 to 90% of fear, doubt, and guilt are all born out of the colonial experience. Fear, because that's how colonialism still dominates the mindset today, traumatized to a point that you're fearful to behave differently. You're fearful to be yourself once again. Doubt always, because of decades and centuries of humiliation and being put down and so on, you're always doubting ourselves, okay? And sometimes even guilt, because it is a well-known characteristic of victims that you end up blaming yourself for being a victim, you know. So these, I would spend days talking about these three, but I've spoken about them before, but I can tell you the agenda for overcoming the mind barriers are around these three: fear, doubt, and guilt. As for the physical barriers, that's what we hear most of the time. People will say, well, how can you unite Africa? There's more than 1,000 languages, ethnic groups. We're never truly autonomous. People talk like that. But we also know that on this continent, it was highly possible that left to itself without the European colonization, Africa would have continued to mingle and intermingle. You would find people who migrate all the way to the south and back to the north and back and forth. There was no evidence that that was going to stop. So people were going to continue to integrate, and it was not stoppable. There was no immigration laws or views which would stop that. The language barrier I've already spoken about. You can go through 1,000 different African languages. The bottom line is that if you look at the essence of the African cultural perspective and worldview, it's practically identical around three major mutualities: belief in mutual respect for everything and everyone, belief in mutual benefit of groups of people, so that you can go different ways, but you always come back to the table to look at mutual benefits. And then mutual responsibility was always strong. So those three mutualities were always found across the language, so-called language barriers. The third issue is around that the colonial experience gave us many different types of administrative systems. The British, different from the French, different from the Portuguese. So the question becomes, which administrative systems are we going to use? They're so different. Once again, you know, these are physical barriers which impede only if you don't have a higher level thought around what you want to achieve. If there's a higher vision of what needs to be achieved, these kinds of barriers don't mean anything. They can be dissolved. Yeah. The same applies to the different economic values that we find across the continent. So Afrocentricity, Kete Asante, very interesting philosophy, which I'm going to go through now because I believe it gives us some food for thought. To start with, without collective memory of Africa across the continent, we are going to find it difficult to unite Africa. That's why detractors and colonizers never want us to talk about our culture or our own stories. They keep telling you and us, oh, it's going to be, it's economic trade, it's trade, it's so on. No, without collective memory, you are not a unit, you are not a family, you are not an organization, you are not anything until you generate a collective memory. So our application of philosophy, science, history, the rituals we go through, the support systems we create around ourselves are all key. And more importantly, the mythology. Once again, they tell us your mythology is witchcraft. So they have taught us to totally forget our mythology. And yet mythology and mythography, which is the creation of mythology, is the single most important quality in envisaging anything and creating new ideas out of nothing, out of an absence of new ideas. So that is an important element of Afrocentricity. Victorious consciousness, because the level of consciousness, if it's not victorious, you're gonna always be a slave. So how do we create that? It also comes out of an awareness of a collective history and a collective future. Once we have these elements, then Africans again become serious creators and producers. To be serious, creative producers and creators requires that level of continuity. Africans, without parallel, always believed in the continuity of spirit and matter, which is what the future is about, which is why Africa is central. It also explains why Africa and Africans are the only group on earth who hardly have any sense of conquering other continents and invading and taking over and having an imperial idea. Because for Africans, it was never an issue of going all over the world, overtaking everybody's worldview. And it's because wherever we are, there's a continuity of spirit and matter. You don't have to be in a specific place to experience life in its fullest. So this is what we are losing now today because we're disconnected from our history and our ancestors. That inability to call upon the power of our ancestors. If you don't longer know them, you can no longer name them. It means you don't know something that is you, because every ounce of your DNA is your ancestors, okay? So this is why we have to respect even our intellectual prophets, the Kwame Nkrumahs and the Marcus Garveys and so on, and helping us to uncover our true selves as we create our own universal cultural system. So this is the thing. The same thing about religion. We are sold a dummy to think it's a neutral thing. There's no religion in the world which did not arise out of someone's declaration of their nationalism. The Romans declared Christianity, and that's why the Roman Catholic Church is still the biggest church in the world today and the wealthiest. It is a true declaration of Roman nationalism, and so was Islam for the Ottomans. You can go on and on. So, but Africans are the only group today who think, oh, we can just believe in somebody else's God because it was written in some book or whatever the master told you. And you're afraid not to believe what the master told you. So somebody said in one of the groups on DWP, we cannot create a new Africa running somebody else's software. Okay, so you buy an Apple Mac computer and you try to run it with Microsoft Windows. We can't. That's why we have to unite around that idea of Afrocentricity. Then we got Marcus Garvey, who his ideas around a United States of Africa had 7 steps that he had mapped out. And if you go into his works, it starts with this awakening that unites Africans, what he called one giant cultural project. And secondly, once that's there, once that awakening of consciousness is there, that changes the thinking and arouses the potential. You see what you have not been able to see as potential, that then channels emotional energy towards a collective interests. Then 4 is when action really starts, what he calls mass sacrificial works, where we just have to sacrifice and give up some of the things we think we can't do, although they don't work. The colonial systems of education don't work. Colonial legal systems only work for 5% of the population. Name it, you can go on and on. We have to have mass sacrificial works to transform those institutions. Then our own application of education and science to industry must create new products and services which don't exist in the rest of the world, because that's what the rest of the world is looking for. It's looking for new ideas from Africa, not just regurgitation of Western and Eastern products. That's how then it's possible to start mass preparation of people to run advanced nations. And keep nurturing ourselves and the nations as we grow into the United States of Africa. So that's Marcus Garvey. And you know, Marcus Garvey, you know, was way back, you know, in the 1920s. Then we have KARENGA, who created, the African-American created a religion, Kwaida. But the important reason why I'm bringing KARENGA on here is his understanding of nationhood and how to to build nations. And he had also got his 7 key elements of nationhood, starting with umoja, which is Swahili for unity. Then kujichagulia, my Swahili is not so good, but self-determination. Ujima, collective work. Ujama, collective economics. Nia, having purpose in life. Kuumba, creativity, and imani, faith. Those are things which paying attention to details as nation builders to see that our strategies and our approaches do have these elements. And you can, once again, when he goes to the criteria around all this, it's around our rituals, our storytelling, how we chronicle ideas, how we describe things for ourselves. The mythology is still huge. The legends, our civilizations, how we evolved, collecting wisdom, our folklore, traditions, all the mythos around these historical elements of our heritage. And that's what allows that creative motive to be present, to have powerful capacity to imagine, to decipher new patterns of life, and to improve persona of everything, including ourselves. And you can go on and on. So that's KARENGA, another powerful African prophet who saw an African approach to nation building in modern times. Then there's Kwame Nkrumah, who is a legend, you know, when it comes to African unity. And in spite of being jailed earlier on in his life, and eventually his party won elections in Ghana in 1951. And shortly after that, he was released and became the first prime minister of the Gold Coast, Ghana. Moved to a responsible government in 1956 and full independence in 1957. Kwame Nkrumah was incredible. In 1958, he organized and held the first conference of independent African states. He was singularly important in that act. And by 1960, they had the second gathering in Addis Ababa, and with a greater number of states. And there you are. That by the time they met for the third time in Addis again, it was 28 states and governments. And they formed the Organization of African Unity. And as I said earlier, although the Organization of African Unity was a much looser arrangement than the Africa Unity, they were able to fight colonialism on the continent until every African nation, all the way up to South Africa, was liberated. So Kwame Nkrumah had some ideals around Pan-Africanism, and he was seeing this at the early stages of independence, hoping that Africans would not make the same mistakes that Europeans made as they were trying to push their own forms of nationalism, etc., etc. So, but anyway, that's Kwame Nkrumah. As I said earlier, Marcus Garvey, amazing guy. I mean, he spoke about United States of Africa, and today we still have some people who agree with him. I think the late Gaddafi was one of them, although he had his own detractors within the African Union around how he was going about it. And today, even young Julius Malema talks about United States of Africa, because these are people who see up there, and their imagination is not curtailed by what we see as physical impossibilities. Because if you don't envision at the highest level, it's difficult. But as I said earlier, the idea of Pan-Africanism, not quite the same thing as the United States of Africa, not quite the same thing as Afrocentricity, but all giving us good ideas of what it takes. Today, obviously, there's no real agreement around what it would look like. The African Union is an advancement on the organization of African unity, but how a truly united Africa will be formed is still a question that has no real consensus amongst the countries and the heads of states, as was seen at the time, even when Gaddafi was pushing for a United States of Africa. Obviously, some thought it was a good idea. I mean, many countries also said, wait a minute, it's not possible, or let's look at it differently. You can go into that history, very interesting, but appropriate. That's the right kind of engagement, which has to continue happening. Because I'm not saying we should go for this model. I'm just simply saying, but when we engage ourselves as Africans, we need to go deep into these conversations and explore the different options until we get to a point where we have action points. And Becky, back in 2002, which is when the African Union was formed, it was a truly incredible time. The African Union formation was truly a momentous occasion. I got so excited about it. I still am. The fact that I may be a bit critical here and there about how we go about it does not subtract from the fact that I honestly believe that the African Union still contains the key elements that are going to take us forward. I'm going to I brought Becky up here because he said some very, very important things at the formation of the African Union, and in his own statement spoke about the common and shared destiny of Africans, and how we must redefine this destiny. You see, once again, a right starting point. If we don't have a collective memory of who we are, where we come from, how can we redefine our destiny? This is why I liked his statement. So all aimed at achieving unity, solidarity, cohesion, cooperation amongst people, African people and as states, but then building the right kind of institutions that can deepen the political and economic and social integration of the continent. This is what Becky was pushing for. That's why the African Union was immediately followed by an idea of NEPAD, developing these new forms of partnerships that make it possible for inclusive development. So the constitutive act of the African Union is a very important piece of legislation. It just now requires to be taken to the next level, where it is possible to have the supranational institutions, such as the Pan-African Parliament, such as the African Bank, our real bank for Africans, such as our Africa Union development agencies, et cetera, really have teeth to bite, really have capacity to bring nations to task on issues where nations have agreed in their parliament to pass policies and laws. So finally, then, that's why I go back to the African Union aspirations. There are 7 major aspirations that we have for ourselves in the African Union. They're really good. My only issue is how to reprioritize these. I would not change them. But if you look at the 7, aspiration number 1 says a prosperous Africa based on inclusive growth and sustainable development. Aspiration 2 says an integrated continent, politically united based on the ideals of Pan-Africanism and the vision of Africa's renaissance. Aspiration 3 says an Africa of good governance, democracy, respect of human rights, justice, and the rule of law. Aspiration 4 says a peaceful and secure Africa. Aspiration 5 says an Africa with a strong cultural identity, common heritage, values, and ethics. Aspiration 6 says an Africa whose development is people-driven, relying on the potential of African people, especially its women and youth, and caring for children. Aspiration 7 says Africa as a strong, united, resilient, and influential global player and partner. Like I say, I would not change these 7. What I would change is the order, because the idea that we will integrate Africa through prosperity, to me, misses a bigger point. I mean, the real number 1 here is what is number 5. So aspiration number 5, in Africa with a strong cultural identity, common heritage, values, and ethics, that's number 1. If we don't have a collective memory of who we are, if we don't have a collective vision of where we are trying to go together, the rest is still going to be difficult, because economic integration alone, we know from the experience of global economy, that it's not sufficient where people don't have strong affinity for each other, a strong cultural common bondage. So that would be really what I would want to see, is a streamlined Africa Union with fewer projects and programs, concentrating on 2 major areas. 1, having programs that truly improve our sense of collective memory, collective common heritage, collective cultural identity, and making it possible for the rest of the world also to see that these are one people, you cannot mess with them. That would be one thing. The second is capacity to defend Africa, its interest fearlessly and fiercely, both in Africa and in the rest of the world, so that once again, centuries of humiliation and despise should be turned into respect for Africans. This is the motherland. This is the center of origin of humans. We are by far the most advanced humans in terms of our understanding of life, our understanding of the continuity of the physical and spiritual world, which is where the future of science is going to be, the future of human development is going to be. Then, number 3, I would then say, prosperity will be natural, will just follow. Well, thank you very much for listening to me. Over to you, moderator.
Thank you very much, Prof, for that presentation. Now we open up the floor for questions and contributions. Please use your hand reaction emoji, and we'll open up your mic for you to speak. We've got Alioni Timothy.
Thank you very much, Prof, for a wonderful presentation. Thank you very much, listeners. Prof, I got excited with the of Mark as supported by Malema insofar as providing a in a unitary state. Yeah, I was thinking of America. The United States of America is one of the actually is the strongest in the world. We have China. China is not United States, but it's the highly populated country, more than 1 billion people. And we have Russia, also has a lot of people, and we have India. You see, those nations with a lot of people, they are the strongest. So I believe the idea of Marcus Garvey is a good one. So, Prof, my question is, let's say you, Prof, you are, it's just an example. Let's say you are elected to be the chairperson of the African Union, and you are asked to give some benefits which may arise from the unitary state of Africa or the United States of Africa. What sort of things you may say, and also, if possible, you may add on the issues of conditions which are necessary for us to have a United States of Africa. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Alioni Timothy. Musonza.
Okay, thank you. I want to ask a question, Professor and everybody else. You know, I think how we approach our decolonization process is really, really critical to how well we succeed. And I've been wondering for a while if we have been sucked into the wrong fight, if we are framing, you know how it is when you go into a court of law, the lawyer who frames the case generally gets to win it because whatever you are doing is in response to how he or she has framed. And what you need to do is frame your own case. And you will find it's a recurrent thing when, especially the African Americans who have been very aggressive in trying to assert a glorious African past, and even ourselves now, because we seem to take our cue from them rather than being the ones leading. We want to compete on the basis of empires, of wealth, of these achievements which equate to the model that our European competitors had or that they espoused, to show that we were just as good as them, or effectively, let me say, just like them in some historical past. But those empires, that wealth, all of the things that they put there are built on bones and death and all kinds of values that are not necessarily that noble. And I'm saying, is it about the outward manifestation of the value system, or is it about the underlying core ideas? Because I think on the core ideas platform, Africa distinguishes itself because of the way we valued the human being, essentially, on at least generally in the history. But I'm wondering if we need to frame our own conversation and lead our own conversation and force the world to respond to that conversation rather than being led and responding to an external thing and running in possibly the wrong conversational direction for what we are trying to achieve. Because generally we did not treat a human being as an economic asset to be exploited, used, and discarded. We did not have certain dehumanization practices, if you will. Well, at least not in the same highly exploitative sense that the people we are competing with historically had. But we want to still compete on the basis of things that are similar. We are trying to compare like with like, but saying we were just like you, but we were superior because we were there first and whatnot. But is that the conversation we need to be in? And can we not shape a different conversation? What could that conversation possibly be. And I think that's all I've got to say for now.
Okay, thank you very much there. Anyone else with a question or contribution? Please use the hand reaction button. Prof, you want to respond to the two whilst we wait for more questions to come in?
Yes. No, thanks very much. So I'll take both questions are very, very pointed and good. So if you look at the way that I've tried to explain our past and present around how we view uniting Africa so that we are powerful again, I've differentiated between three major blocks of, call it philosophy or thinking, the kind of Pan-Africanists who are not sold on any singular kind of let's have a United States of Africa, which is the second idea. And then the third idea of Afrocentricity, which is what Musonza is talking about. So if you look carefully at the whole essence of Afrocentricity, is more what Musonza is actually talking about. So you are not fast around what the answer is. You are fast around how Africans we view ourselves, we believe in ourselves, we understand the essence of the physical and the spiritual world. We know how to build things. We know how to produce. We know how to build nations. We need how to build families. Okay, so the agenda is, so it's not for you or me to set the agenda. The people set the agenda. It's not about you and me. So I think, so if I finish off with Musonza's point first, so it's not about so and so is setting the agenda. If you get the essence of where I'm going, is to say this is what has been the attempts to set the agenda, and then we end up where we are today with the Africa Union system. So what's the way forward? And I think that the way forward is then acknowledging where we've come from, what the philosophies have been, what the schools of thought have been, what has worked and what hasn't worked. So I'm a proponent for, let's take, that's why I gave the 6 ideas, because let's get the best out of each and allow a continuous brick by brick building of the strategies, because there's actually not one single one that we can say that's the only one that's going to work. But if I was to go back to Alioni's question, if I was given a chance to be a president of, say, a United States of Africa, I would go back to what I learned from my own heritage, because I'm a Moyo by tradition. My great grandfather was the last king for Zimbabwe here, Toichibi Chibamba. Okay. Now, what I learned as a tradition of leadership is that from my ancestors, you don't govern people, you know. You don't rule over people. It doesn't happen. Okay. People rule themselves. They govern themselves. It's what light you throw onto them. It's what light they see for themselves that governs their own conscience, that guides their own self-control. So I don't see, I would say that's exactly what I would say. I would say, although you have elected me to be the president of Africa, at the end of the day, it's not about me really. It's about the capacity of people to govern themselves. It's the capacity of people to realize that life is not about what you're told by the master. It's about how you create life for yourself, how you explore, how you experience and enjoy life. the essence goes back to what I then called the three mutualities. I would spend most of my inaugural speech early on talking about the three mutualities. Without mutual respect amongst people of different origins and different belief systems, mutual respect for me is number one, a cultural powerhouse of the Africans. The Africans did not care what religion you were. You believe in your ancestors or your origin. No one wanted to belong to somebody else's ancestry. Okay, there was no fight. So respect, it's a mutual respect across the board is number one. Number two is mutual benefit. When we fight and disagree, at the end of the day, we come together and ask, okay, we go in different directions, but where do we really have no choice but to have mutual benefit? And if you see how we handle the environment historically, it was on a basis of mutual benefit. It was your conscience which would take you in the forest. You would be on your own, but you would know exactly what animal you could not kill, what tree you could not chop down. No policeman, okay, no lawyer to send you summons. That's because when the idea of mutual benefit becomes ingrained and it governs your conscience, that's why we're able to live so peacefully with the environment and with wildlife. And then finally, I'll spend a lot of time talking about mutual responsibility, because once again, the idea that you can police the world, there's no superpowers in the future. It doesn't matter how China, it doesn't matter how powerful it's going to be, India, Brazil. The future has no singular superpower. I would tell my people, we want to be powerful as Africans, but not to be a superpower so that we can harass everybody else and be a policeman for everybody. I mean, you can't be a policeman of the rest of the world when you can't even police your own people. You have to shoot them down every day. Okay, so that's what I would say. It's about mutual responsibility. We are all accountable to each other. So how do we build that? How do we build these three mutualities in all our institutions, from family all the way to the United Nations? That's what I would say. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Prof. Any more questions or contributions? Jesse?
Thank you, Prof. Thank you, Mr. Moderator. I think that it's very important to discuss this kind of topic. Uniting Africa, I think, is quite interesting topic. But my point is we must start discussing it at political level. Why I'm saying that? I'm saying that because people, when you see people who live closer to the borders, they live their lives moving from one country to another. They share cultural values, they share everything. But our main problem are at the political level. We need actions at the political level. I revised the manifesto of political parties here in Mozambique from the last elections, and no party spoke about regional or continental cooperation. All of them spoke about international investment. They call it in Portuguese, atrair investimento estrangeiro. It means like to attract investment or international investment. And then by international, they mean USA, they mean Europe, they mean China. Or our political parts, they write the manifesto to say that, okay, we need to develop our country. And to do that, we must do everything to attract people from USA, China, or Europe to come here to what they call investing. But there are no actions about how people from the continent will cooperate, what the program we can do together, how we can do business from Mozambique to Zimbabwe, from Mozambique to Malawi, for instance. Yeah, this is why I'm saying that we need to think about what we must do at the political level. Thank you, moderator, and thank you, Prof.
Thank you very much for that, Jesse. We've got Musonza again.
Yes, it's me again. I just wanted to ask, I'll try and be really brief this time. What do we make of the fact that, at least within my frame of reference, there may be some who are not doing it quite the same way, that our own indigenously held capital is investing in almost the same way that the colonial capital invested? I have little evidence of leading African entrepreneurs and corporations and so on investing in our humanity. We don't have anybody who has, to my knowledge, who has funded a chair at even the University of Zimbabwe or some other university to study something that's deeply important to our spirituality, to our epistemologies and things like this. So our capital is buying up assets and exploiting assets and growing that value, but our human value is not getting the same level of attention. I don't know how we progress or how effectively we can when our capital reserves are, I don't want to say misdirected, but are not, none of them is being channeled focusedly towards re-energizing and therefore empowering our humanity to allow us, because all of these things take money. The cultures we're competing with invest huge amounts of money in their humanities, in the things that keep them connected to who they are, what they are, where they're from, and therefore point up a way to what's possible for their future. But we have to go to those same people we're competing with to get grant funding, to get soft money, to get all these things. And there is no facility to help Africans connect with those realities that is consistently and constantly funded to allow us to do things. How well do we do? How far do we go with being hamstrung in that way? Because I consider it being hamstrung in a very significant way. Thank you.
Thank you very much for that. We have Mazita and then Jeff after. So over to you, Mazita.
Thank you, Prof, for the presentation. I have a question, and it's with regards to unity. We are talking about African unity, uniting as Africans, but I'm not quite seeing how we will be able to achieve that when even as individual nations, we are not united. We get issues where when we have an internal issue, instead of dealing with it, fixing it, as a nation, we revert to the US, we revert to the EU, and it's with regards to all aspects, be it political, social, economic, to a point where it then gets embarrassing. So how do we talk about African unity when as individual nations, we are not even united? And there's also the issue where we have a number of African leaders who have spoken on the issues we're speaking on now. And the problem then arises because those leaders are then
Hello, Mazita, we can't hear you. Mazita? I think we've lost Mazrita Tech. Please check in on that. We'll move on to Jeff whilst we wait for Mazrita to come back in.
Okay, thanks, Kevin. Thanks, Prof. I think this is quite an exciting and very important discussion. My question, I don't know if it's a question or what, but I need a bit of guidance here, Prof. It's like the first thing that I've noticed when I traveled around Africa, I find that some Africans themselves, they don't even think they're African. Like an example, if you go to Seychelles, you find that people there, when they look at you, they will say, you are African, and they are not. So as much as that is like that, you find also that we have people like South Africans who thinks that they are better Africans than the rest of Africa. So I think on that regard, my question is, how do we speed up the process of being on the same page with these guys? How do we decolonize them? Because without that, it's going to be very difficult for us to transition towards One Afrika. Then the second issue is also to do with leadership from various African countries who are benefiting from the current status quo. So some of them might actually be used by foreigners or foreign forces to destabilize Africa, because this creates an opportunity for those foreign countries to come in and extract and exploit our natural resources without having to pay for them as much as they should be. So also, how do we overcome that challenge of having, part of our own people who will be fighting against the achievement of this goal, because it's actually for them, it's a bread basket. So probably I would say those are the two main issues I have. Thank you.
Thank you very much for that, Jeff. We'll bring Mazrita back in so she can finish her question. After Mazrita, then we'll have Brian. Over to you, Mazrita.
Thank you, Kevin. The last part of my question, I think the last part is what you had missed. I was having network problems. The last part, in the last part, I was asking that we have various African leaders who have spoken on what we're speaking on today, and they've really tried to push for everything we're speaking of. But they sometimes meet with a lot of resistance, and I think the Prof spoke about it in his presentation. So now my question would be, how do we then promote unity to an extent where we then support such leaders? Because most of the leaders who've done that in the past, they've been castigated for it, and more often than not, they've met a very sad end. So how do we go about all of this? Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mazrita. Brian?
Yeah, thank you so much. Prof, I really subscribe to the notion of United States of Africa, but I've got a question, and I think my question adds up to Mazrita and Jeff's questions. So my question is, given that in Africa we have got more than 3,000 ethnic groups or tribes, how feasible is the aspect of a United States of Africa, given the diversity and also leadership conflicts that may arise from those sub-ethnic groups. And also given the aspect of maybe greediness and power hungry of the leadership, how feasible is that again of the United States of Africa? Thank you.
Thank you very much, Brian. Over to you, Prof.
Okay, thanks a lot for those interventions and questions. So if I start with Jesse, Mutu Brigada, and thanks for very interesting interventions. The question as to what the starting point is a very, very important question. Do we start with political integration, or we start with economic integration, or do we start with cultural integration? And the more I have looked at what's happening on the continent and what we are working towards, and what the positive forces are and the positive and the negative ones, it's an iterative process. So and at each point in time, it's the art of the possible, which is where I might agree with you when you say politics, because politics is the art of the possible. There are certain things which won't be possible because the nation states won't allow them to happen, even though they may be adding to more unity. And conversely, there are things that the rest of the world will try to fight against, because if Africans are going to be united, it's bad news for the European Union and the way they negotiate trade deals with every little country signs some trade deal, which just basically makes them a slave economy for which can't manufacture for yourself for the next 50 years. Meanwhile, if we were united and we knew our economic power and how to leverage it and how to negotiate, of course the Europeans won't like that, and neither will the British, although they're Brexited. They are hoping that they will individually use their influence as formerly emperors, to strike better trade deals than the Europeans will do with Africans. So starting politically, for me, is its advantages of art of the possible. The disadvantage is that the political systems that we are talking about today of party politics are very European in idea and can never really politically unite people. So when we say politics, Jesse, it's two forms of politics. There's Western style politics, which is a numbers game, elections and all that, belong to this party. It's an industrial approach to politics. Africans is about relationships and which relationships are strong and how do you build the relationships. So it depends it's how do we transition from this type of politics to the truly African politics in modern terms. And I would say that once again, if we as Africans are not daunted by the idea that we speak different languages, we in a different geographical regions, etc., and truly believe that you see a Black person, it's you. The fact that they speak a different language, it should not be the deterring fact. It should be the exciting fact that here's somebody who is just like me. They probably have cultures which are similar to mine, and all that's standing between me and this person is language. It's just imagine what an exciting opportunity it is. You really want to know this person. You really want to because everyone who is African, you want to interact with. You can just imagine if Africans said, the more languages and the more diverse the languages are in Africa, the more exciting it is to explore our African connectedness. If you just twist it around, instead of saying we got 1,000 different languages, therefore how do we unite? It's actually the opposite. We got 1,000 different opportunities to interact and explore each other and rediscover ourselves, because you should never be afraid of another African because they don't speak your mother tongue, because whatever tongue they speak, you're going to find it's interpreting more or less your own experience, because the ethos of Africanness is the same across the continent. I've gone up and down this continent. You can hardly find radical differences. There are minor differences around how we understand family and how family reacts, marriage, community, politics, how we compete and fight, how how we have fun. It's just amazing. We are so similar that the differences are just where the opportunities are to make it even more exciting. So politics is a good start as long as we are not stuck with Western style politics, Jesse, and we are exploring relationships, which is the African idea of politics. When it comes to Musonza's issue on investment into what truly matters, the indigenous issues, and we once again we are in the territory of what is wealth, what is capital anyway. Okay, so the colonial system sold us a dummy. They come over here and change our economics to you produce primary products for them. You think it's more important to export and get a bit of foreign currency from them. Meanwhile, your own food system is going through the tubes. You can't even produce enough for yourself. You can't even manufacture much for yourself. So that's why every African country is headed for a middle income trap. So it doesn't matter which way you look at it. The beauty, or let me be a prophet. Let me be a prophet and just tell you, it doesn't matter what happens over the next 50 years in Africa. The idea of a post-colonial state that is sustainable, you can forget about. It's all going to collapse. So people can, it doesn't matter what political system we put in place. It doesn't matter how many armies we put up to protect this post-colonial economy we are enjoying now. It's going to collapse because everyone is headed for a very, very tight, dualistic, middle income trapped economies where the majority of the people are not part of the manufacturing process. They're not part of the whole idea of an industrialized economy. So as long as the majority of the people are outside, they're tinkering around what you call informal sector, and you don't incorporate them, the informal sector becomes the formal sector. What we call the formal sector, a few big companies investing, quote unquote, and that's the informal economy actually in Africa. The actual formal economy is the indigenous economy. That's why a country like Zimbabwe, people can say sanctions, they can say whatever they want to say. We are going to find average person alive and thriving, because they're not going to work in the so-called formal economy. The formal economy is working because you're calling it informal and you don't even know that that's the biggest part of the economy. So investing money is less than 15% of what capital really is. But we've been sold a dummy because what we're looking for is cash. And cash is the least important aspect of capital. The most important aspect of capital is information. Information around whatever it is you're pushing economically. If you're pushing products, if you're pushing services, if you're pushing production, it's about information. Information determines the extent of which you build wealth. Okay, that's wealth. But we are sold cash, and then whatever we do, they give us a bit of cash, we chew the cash, is finished, and you want more capital. Then you invest in things that they are looking for, and we call that investment. It's not. A real investment is around deeper understanding of our own assets, products, and services, and then developing them, modernizing them, not westernizing them, modernizing them so that we have an improvement in our standard of life. It's not about cash. We've been sold this dummy about cash. It's just amazing. So if you go to Mazita, agonizing around African unity because of the level of individualism. Actually, you mentioned that word. It's happening at all levels. Individualism at family level is now crept. It's now even at family level, at national level, in government. And then when we meet at Africa Union, each country is a sovereign state, and no one. And then the extent to which you want to unite with another one is limited. As long as you leave me alone, I'm a sovereign nation. So So what Western civilization has done, it has given us some brilliant things. I mean, it has brought brilliant technologies and exciting ideas around commerce and so on. But it's been a serious a negative force when it comes to individualism and consumerism. So what we are faced with, once again, Mazita, I'm sorry to be this kind of a prophet, but I can tell you, it doesn't matter what it is that we are experiencing today as forms of individualism and persecution, rich getting richer, poor getting poorer. It's not gonna last forever. At my age, I'll probably die before I see the kind of really Africa I want to see, but I can tell you, I'm already seeing it's going to happen. We can't stop it. So it's just a matter of time. It's a matter of building it more confidently. And when we are united in our collective memories and in our collective ideas of what the future is, it doesn't matter who dies or gets killed in trying to push these ideas, because those who remain are going to keep pushing it. But if you are so fearful that your individual death is going to kill the African dream, that's what is making us slaves forever. Because without boldness, serious boldness, if we are unable to overcome the fear at a collective level, not at an individual level, we will never see the desired future. And once we are collectively bold, and we are no longer afraid that we are individually vulnerable, because it doesn't matter, they kill you, this nation may suffer today, but we know collectively we are going to rise. No one can stop us. The post-colonial state will never succeed. It has to be a new form of African state with a new understanding of broad-based economics that makes Africa a highly productive industrial society where villages and small towns are manufacturing, are producing goods and services, are consuming their own products. If we don't have that and we think it's about trade and importing goods from somewhere else, it doesn't matter how many billionaires we produce in Africa, it's gonna collapse. Okay, so the future is still gonna come. The post-colonial state is failed, meaning we're never gonna be colonized again. We're gonna have bouts of semi-colonization again, the Chinese coming in and trying to take the resources, and these ones coming in, the Americans reacting, the Europeans, it's gonna happen. But we cannot be so fearful that, you know, in my own lifetime, I want to see a united Africa. No, my thing is, you must see a united Africa, whether you are here or not, whether they eliminate you or not, that's not the point. It's a collective belief, it's a collective boldness, it's the collective faith that will deliver a truly African future. Then it doesn't matter what happens. And that is what's missing when you say individualism. That's my interpretation of individualism is forgetting the collective future to a point where you think your individual future today, and we're all gonna die anyway. So what? And your great children are still gonna suffer because you're not able to invest in a collective future. So when I think Mazita came back and pushed that point, if I missed anything there, I'd like to apologize. Then Jeff Gwamuri came in and with the leadership issue. And forgive me if I wrote it down. You were talking about the speeding up the process, and the leadership challenge, because really there's a lot of selfishness and benefiting from the status quo, if I got you right. So once again, Jeffrey, I'm sorry to give you the same kind of philosophical response, but it's a really practical one as far as I'm concerned. Yes, leaders can be selfish today and benefit from the status quo, but the status quo is not sustainable. What we need to understand is that the more Africans realize that it's not only politics that is important in life, to be able to translate the idea of selfishness, so that you benefit today, but the future is bleak. No, the point is, the more Africans realize that The post-colonial state has no future. The dual economy has no future. The rich will get richer and the poor will get poorer. Is no future. It's not going to happen. It will collapse. Okay, so what's important is to realize that and then ask the question, so how do we start brick by brick building a future modern economy, social fabric that makes it possible for everyone to be fully employed, for everyone to understand that technology, manufacturing, production, consumption is nothing other than mass producing at a local level, things that you can mass process for ourselves and mass consume for ourselves, healthy foods, products, and that trading and exchanging is a secondary level. It's not the primary level. The primary is what you do for ourselves, for our own domestic market, creating our own superb food system where we produce massively and process massively healthy foods and consume them ourselves. And others who want to buy our surplus. That's how we are going to build this future. The fact that some people think they want to get filthy rich today whilst everybody is poor, it's too bad, but that doesn't stop me knowing that it's not sustainable. It's not going to go very far. Then Brian, you were talking about, I've already kind of started answering your question around, so how do we do it with 3,000 languages and, power-hungry leaders and so on and so forth. I think I've already kind of started answering that question and basically saying, Brian, do you know, I'm sure you would know in your science that your body alone is more than 7,000 trillion atoms. You got more than 50 trillion cells in your body. Now, each and every of those billions of atoms in your body is an individual entity. They are not you, actually. They have a completely individual life. And you are losing millions of them every second, and you get some more in to create your next stage of your life. And yet you are able to exist with billions of entities that form you. You don't even know the language they speak. Do you know the language a cell speaks? Do you know the language an atom speaks? But they are you, they are part of you. You don't even know what the back of your head looks like. You may have seen it once in a while in the mirror, but do you know what your heart really looks like or how it does what it does? You don't. So why are you afraid of believing that 3,000 different languages does not mean you are different? It just means that you've got diversity. So there's a difference between difference and diversity. I've already said it. Every African person or of descent in the world just has to realize one thing. The reason we have been persecuted for the last 500 years or so is because of your color and appearance. It's not where you come from, what your name is, whether you were born in the Caribbean or you were born in Guinea or in South Africa. If you are a Black person, you're going to be persecuted first and foremost just by the way you look and the color of your skin. Okay, so if your detractors don't see the differences you're worried about, they don't care there's 1,000, 3,000 different languages in Africa. You could have 3,000 Africans lined up, they all speak a different language. The colonial world does not care. You are still one African group of people and they're going to be treated the same. So why do you then yourself choose to say, no, but our differences are more important than our similarities? That's the level of visioning that Africans have failed to encompass. The realization that our differences are minuscule. They don't mean anything to the rest of the world. It's our similarities that matter to the world. So how do we build an Africa based on our similarities? Why do you want to build an Africa based on your differences? Like I say, it's not even differences, it's just a diversity. because there were the same people who were just diversifying into different languages. It's not like we were completely different people. We're just, if you look at languages today in Southern Africa alone, I mean, a lot of them are the same languages which were split because of colonial rule, which, depending on which missionary taught you how to speak your language using the syntax of a foreign colonizer. Okay, so Brian, I'm sorry, you know, and don't even think that I'm being philosophical. I'm being very practical. If you, as an African, understand the significance and centrality of being African, if you understand the fact that the rest of the world which does not have respect for Africa, does not care how many languages you speak in Africa, they don't care which part of Africa you come from. You are still an African. If we turn that round to our strength, is to say, well, whatever institutions we build at national level, family national, whatever we build at Africa Union level, the rest of the world should know. You don't mess around with an African. You don't touch an African. All this nonsense that's happening where Americans shoot Africans every day will stop immediately, you know? So Africans are suffering throughout the world because we Africans are not united. We are not able to tell the world who our true selves are, and that after 500 years of slavery and colonialism, why afraid of dying when you know you still have your great grandchildren? Who are you who are going to still be around? So leave behind the idea that those who are going to stay behind are not going to be messed around with. People are going to die and go. That's what life is. So it's the ideas that should not die. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Prof, for that. Unfortunately, we have run out of time, so I'll have to close off the session. Thank you, everyone, for your time and contributions. Thank you, Prof, for a wonderful presentation and taking your time to share this knowledge with us today. Big shout out to the technical team for putting this session together. Please do like our YouTube channel, Dialogue with Prof Mandi Rukuni, to get more content which will be shared. We'll move the conversation to our WhatsApp and Telegram groups where Prof will share his final thoughts. For those who still had questions and contributions, please do share your questions or contributions in the groups and we'll respond to them. Thank you very much. Good night and catch you next week.